Age of Men is over. The time of the Orc has come.
Alright, hello, welcome back to the Goblin King YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be just kind of I guess it's going to be a review of the Fellowship of the Ring. It's more going to be just a love tribute because this is my favorite book of all time. For a lot of you that probably know me on YouTube, you know I love the Song of Ice and Fire series. And I've always compared the two, but by saying Lord of the Rings has my favorite book ever, but A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite series. So Lord of the Rings is, again, very close second, but this is my favorite book, and we're going to go through all of the reasons that I think this is the best book of all time, why I love this book, and again, this is my personal opinion. You guys might have your own favorite book, but we're going to go through all the things that I think make this book perfect. And another thing I want to preference is that I do have a lot of nostalgia for this book. I was introduced to Lord of the Rings at a very young age. This is one of the first things I really got into, and I've loved both the movie and the book, especially the first one, the first movie, first book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And they have, gotten me through a lot. So I wanted to do a video where this is going to be a 3-part series because we will do the other 2 books as well, but I wanted to hit Fellowship of the Ring now just because I'm fresh off of reading it. I just got done reading the first one, so if you guys have ever looked at my background, the Lord of the Ring books are actually right there. And in the recent videos on this channel, and even on my Song of Ice and Fire channel, one of the books has been missing, and that was Fellowship, so I just got done with that. And I wanted to kind of go through the entire story and look at everything I loved about it and the themes that are really great in this book that are introduced and how to tell a story properly. I think that's been something that's lost to time as we've gone on, whether that's movies, whether that's modern books, things like that. Tolkien really perfected the idea of a story and how to start up characters and introduce a world. And I'm going to do some comparisons to other books as well, just showing how Tolkien kind of crafted how you do a story. So before we get into the actual book review and we get going into this, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach people that might like this content as well. We do all sorts of Lord of the Rings content and may dive into some other things, but as of right now, just Lord of the Rings. So, starting out with the Fellowship of the Ring, the introduction into this story, and I kind of want to talk about the tone of this story right from the beginning because it's something that needs to be talked about, how well this story is crafted. Because from the beginning of the story, it's kind of this introduction, and it's this slow idea of feeling like you're at home. Like the Shire feels very homely. It feels like an ideal, like kind of nice area to live. And there's a lot of calm going on. And we're slowly introduced into what the real threat is with the ring and Sauron. And that's through, Bilbo's party and Bilbo's then disappearance. And the idea of the ring. Now, for people that have gone into the Tolkien ideology and what he got a lot of inspiration from, Christianity and religion as a whole is where he drew a lot of themes from, whether that's Norse or other types of religions or mythologies that he took into this world. Tolkien does a really great job of, yes, it is based on like his religion and Christianity as a whole on themes like the ring, and good versus evil and stuff like that, and then like angels and stuff like that. And you have that idea present, and that resonates with people of religion, but this story doesn't need you to be Christian or have any type of religion to enjoy this story and really understand what Tolkien is trying to say. And as we go through this story and go through that's very present in the way he writes certain things. So we're introduced into this idea of the ring, and the ring is something that I think the movies didn't do as good of a job as I think the books do. And Fellowship of the Ring has a couple moments that were just not present at all within the movie. And again, I want to preference this by saying, because I think I'm going to do a video where I'm talking about the differences between the book and the movie and what was good, what was bad. I think the movies are the greatest trilogy of all time. All 3 of the movies are my top 5 movies of all time. So any criticism is kind of minor things that are just like the books did better or maybe the movie did better. And so we're going to start with the idea of the ring and something that is heavily shown what it does in this first book. the ring is kind of this idea of temptation. It's kind of like the devil on your shoulder, where the ring is its own entity trying to persuade you to do certain things or persuade you to do actions. So, for instance, one of the ideas of the ring that we see commonly is making the wearer want to put the ring on. It makes you kind of forget what you've been told. You have all of this information. Frodo knows that the ring is this treacherous thing. It's of evil, that you cannot wield the ring, right? But even in these moments, there's almost excuses in Frodo's head. Where if we look at the Barrow Downs and the Whites, that again something completely cut from the movie, and again I understand why they did that, and we'll talk about that probably in another video. But it's a great mark of showing what the ring does. Where Frodo is this character that would never leave his friends behind, is this character that doesn't want his friends to even come with him because he doesn't want them to get into harm. That's another main theme we'll talk about getting towards the end of the book and that whole little theme there. But the idea of the ring here is that it puts these ideas into Frodo's mind that Gandalf wouldn't blame him if Frodo put the ring on and left. What could he do in this situation? And that's not really Frodo, right? Frodo is not someone that would abandon his friends, but it's what the ring does. Especially when you get in more dire situations and the temptation gets even more great because of your peril. And it's this idea of Frodo having to fight that urge, having to fight the urge of putting the ring on when he's with the Nazgul. And it's something I really love. And I think something that I think is one of my major complaints, even though it's still not a terribly big complaint of the movies, is a lot of Frodo's heroic actions are actually kind of cut from the movies. And you have the idea of Frodo when he's getting to Rivendell, when he crosses the river, of in the movie of being Arwen, this character that holds up her sword and is like the last defense against the Nazgul. Frodo is alone in the book, and it's one of my favorite moments from the entire book where Frodo is fading into shadow and he's losing all of his strength and he's fading into a white. And he raises his sword and he does defiance against these all nine Nazgul. They are the definition of fear. And I love this scene for Frodo. And again, the scene I mentioned with the Barrow Downs and the Whites, where Frodo doesn't abandon his friends. And he finds the courage to not only try and get up and help his friends, but to also call Tom Bombadil and come to his senses. I love that theme of Frodo overcoming. And one of the big tragedies and I guess themes of the entire series as we go forward is this idea of sin. Everyone sins and gives into temptation every once in a while. And I think that's one of the big themes here, because the idea of the ring is you could never throw it away, right? You can never willingly throw it away and get rid of sin and all these things that Tolkien is trying to talk on. I love that. That's a great idea for kind of a main central conflict of the story. And we see how that impacts a ton of characters. How does that affect a character like, say, Boromir? And it's something that I think, again, the movies, they did a good job with Boromir, but they missed a lot of his heroic things. In the movie, Boromir kind of loses a lot of his heroic features. Like the scene where Boromir kind of has the ring and he gives it to Frodo because it falls off or something in the movie. It's not really present in the book at all. And Boromir doesn't really show any going towards the ring type stuff until a little bit later. And it's after desperation. It's after not really being listened to. And again, Boromir's suggestions aren't like the greatest, but it's that idea of Boromir has his own ideals and things that he wants to do. He wants to save his home. And that's a interesting idea, because how would Frodo react in a situation with the ring if he knew that, say, the Shire was about to be, sieged? And again, Frodo does know that's a possibility, especially with Galadriel and all those things, but it's not as immediate. Gondor is basically under siege and kind of preparing for war as we speak. And the longer that we idle and that we stay in Lothlorien and places like that, the more likely it is that Gondor will be unprepared for this war against Sauron. And that's something that's always in Boromir's mind. And you also look at the idea of Denethor also being this character that is kind of relying on Boromir. there's a lot of things going on there, and I love the way that's played onto, where as the situation becomes harder and you grow more desperate, that idea of sin and temptation is able to fall into your mind to where it corrupts Boromir to try and take the ring from Frodo. There are great themes within this book, and it's something I love. Now, those aren't really the elements that make this my favorite book of the three, but it's something that's very present. Now, another theme that's very present all the way through is Frodo constantly is battling within himself. Should I put my friends in danger? Should I let them come with me? Because in the book, Frodo doesn't really intend characters like Merry and Pippin to go along with him. And I know that's kind of the same in the movie as well, but it's different in the book, because in the book, characters like Merry and Pippin and Sam figure out what's going on with Frodo before Frodo tells him what's going on. They kind of figure out that it is the ring that is causing this problem. And they go with Frodo willingly, knowing that there is this danger. And I love this idea that Frodo is happy that they're going with him, but at the same time, he knows the danger he's putting them in. And it's this constant idea, kind of after we see Gandalf fall, it's something where it just builds throughout the entire book of, what will you do if you know that your friends could die, the people you love could be put in harm's way if they go further with you? And I think the more heartbreaking thing that Frodo realizes is that not only that, but Frodo being around people like Merry and Sam could corrupt them, could turn them against Frodo because of the sway and power of the ring. And that's something that I think would break Frodo on his quest. And it's something we even see with Sam, where the two start to have their division a bit. It's something that Frodo cannot bear. And I love that that's been building all the way up until the last portion of the book, where Frodo kind of knows what he has to do, but he doesn't know how to do it. And he's too afraid to go alone, because how would you feel, right? You're put in this impossible situation where you have the fate of the world on your shoulders. You're not strong. You're not 6'5". You're not extremely muscular. You're someone that's not physically gifted. You're someone that's not the greatest fighter in this world of men and elves and dwarves. You're just a hobbit. How would you feel when looking at that situation? And also knowing that if you go alone, you don't know how to get to Mordor. You don't know all this information that could be used to help destroy the ring. But if you don't go alone, you're putting people in peril that you love, like your closest friends. And it's a great idea on the kind of complexities of Tolkien's writing in this first book. And it kind of keeps going further, but I love the way Frodo is forced to make this decision. And Boromir and how he tries to take the ring from Frodo is a blessing and a curse, because it's kind of the push that Frodo needs, and this idea that he can't let this happen to other people that he loves, like Merry and Pippin, and specifically Sam, because again, Frodo was not going to go with Sam. So I think that is another theme that I love, and I just want to take a look maybe at the pacing of the book as a whole. Think about where we go as a story, because a lot of stories tend to just go like this. And it's like just straight up build, which can be good, don't get me wrong, and others just don't feel like they understand how to navigate a story correctly. What this story does is it builds up the danger slowly. And then it has Frodo depart the Shire. And we just see more and more fear grow as we know something is wrong. Gandalf has not come to see Frodo off. There's these black riders on the road asking about Frodo, and all of this seems eerie. And as the journey continues, we see more where Gildor seems very confused and even fearful of what is hunting them. And that fear just keeps building. And then we have like a plateau. Every once in a while, Tolkien gives us these resting areas. Crick Hollow just seems like a break from the tension. He lets us kind of sit there for a second and really consume what we just read. This entire first part of it, where we can sit back and go, okay, what is going on? Let me process what happened. And then we set off again. And what I love here is that the entire time you're on this journey with Frodo and Sam, Merry, Pippin, and the rest of the Fellowship as the story goes on, you feel like you're with them. The struggles they're going through, you feel like you can relate to it. The atmosphere, you feel like you're there. Tolkien just has a way with words where he can talk about where our characters are and you feel like you're there, whether that's you're on a nice grassland or you're in the mountains or you're in a hilly or swampy area. You feel like you're there with the characters. And when you go into a place like the Old Forest, you're right there with the characters, where our characters start to kind of forget the threat of the Nazgul, like kind of like the reader does. Because we aren't really thinking about the Black Arts. They're not our immediate threat right now. It's this old forest, this devious forest that has a lot of rumors that aren't so good about it. And our characters, they go in and they forget their troubles a little. And we have this whole idea of the old forest and Old Man Willow and him trapping Merry and Pippin. And we're introduced into the Tom Bombadil section of this early portion of the story. And again, it's another, I guess, break from the fearfulness of the old forest and of the Nazgul. And we continue again. And again, the presence of dread and fear continues to grow as we go to the whites, Barrow Wights, that have this, again, eerie feeling, similar to the Nazgul, but different. And that only kind of builds as we get to Bree. Now, Bree is this place where it is a resting point and something to ease the tension again and let us reflect on the material, but it's also this place where it doesn't really feel like Crick Hollow. It kind of feels like, again, our characters are still being actively hunted, and they've maybe even infiltrated Bree already. And I love the way we see that Aragorn is revealed in a way that, how do you trust these strangers? Frodo and company do not know who Aragorn is, and they must judge his character and try to figure out if he is trustworthy. I love that introduction and all of that. And then we also see kind of something that allows a Nazgul to get a jump on the company as the letter wasn't delivered to Frodo. And we see that the Nazgul even infiltrate Bree. And this builds our tension even more, because now you're thinking in the back of your mind, well, if the Nazgul can get into this town and they have informants in this town, that where is this company in the ring going to be safe? And that's something that now is in the back of your mind as the company leave with Aragorn, of this idea of we're constantly being hunted. There's no escape. And that's the truth. Until the ring is destroyed, there is no escape from this. And that is the part of the tension that's fantastic. That even when we're at a place like Rivendell where we can relax a little bit, our characters are safe, and we can, listen to songs, poems, all of these things, in the back of our head we're thinking, just like the characters, the dread of leaving Rivendell, the dread of being in the wild again and being hunted by the enemy and all of that. It's a fantastic way of writing. And as we get, again, some more foreshadowing to what's going on with Gandalf, with the kind of the lights and his fire, with his fight with the Nazgul at Weathertop, again, we see our company continue to move towards Weathertop. And it all culminates in this, because this is, to me, probably the climax of the first half of the book, of, again, this confrontation with the Nazgul. And we see that Frodo takes a mortal wound, but they are beaten off. And again, I really love this section, because I love the idea of the Nazgul. I love that they are more of a presence. You can feel them before you see them. They're a cold presence. They fill you with dread. I love the Nazgul. They're some of my favorite villains in any kind of fantasy or even medium. I love the idea of them. And at this point, it just feels like the tension is rising and rising, because will Frodo survive this wound? It's not so much about the Nazgul hunting them. It's more, can they make it to Rivendell before Frodo becomes a White? And they finally get to Rivendell, and we start to see a lot of information dump. And that's something I think that Tolkien does really, really well. There is a lot of lore that is explored in the first half of this book, but it never feels out of place. It never feels like, oh, this is just an info dump for the audience. Because Tolkien does something that has been copied and copied and copied to death. Tolkien is able to have a main character that doesn't understand a lot about this world or a lot about what is going on, because the Shire is this area that they don't interact with a lot of the outside folk. They don't leave their land very often. So as Frodo is finding things out or exploring areas, it's all new to him like it is new to us. And it's something we've seen over and over again with stories. For instance, like if you look at the Percy Jackson series, I'm reading that right now. It's this idea that Percy Jackson is new to all these things because he didn't know he was a half-blood. So we're kind of going through all the motions with him. It's something that we see over and over again. We go through with Harry Potter. Harry Potter is this character that doesn't know anything about the magic world because his parents were killed. He had to live with normal people. We didn't understand it. So we're looking and being introduced into this world with Harry. And that's something that Tolkien really does well in this story. And I think I give a lot of credit to him for kind of starting that. I think he was someone that was a big influence on how we look at stories today and how we look at a main character, especially going into a world where they don't know a lot about it. So that kind of gets us to Rivendell, and Rivendell is, again, a lot of information, but it seems very relevant, right? It's not like you're getting information to get information so you know more about the world. It's more like this makes a lot of sense because we're at a council where a lot of people don't know this information. Like, Glowin being here and telling this information about Moria and what's going on at Erebor makes a lot of sense. Frodo is a character to be very interested in a lot of those things. Or how does the ring get to where it is now in Rivendell? All of our characters that are present at the Council of Elrond are going to want to know that, and it's a relevant story to learn. All of these things and these histories and the goings-ons of the world feels very natural. It's not something that feels forced, where I feel like there's a lot of stories and TV shows now where information feels forced. It doesn't feel like it's natural into the story. It feels like it's pushed in there because the audience needs to know it. And all of these things are there for a reason. It goes to, again, expand the world and also build our own characters, even to foreshadow events like going into Moria. This idea that, well, we haven't heard from Balin in a while, and we're starting to get a little worried, and then someone comes to Erebor basically saying, we'll give you Moria back, your old kingdom. It makes you feel a little suspicious about what's going on in Moria, and that's kind of the point. And, finding out this information that Sauron has betrayed us. And that is very relevant to the story because it cuts off how Frodo and the party can get east of the mountains. So all of this is very relevant information to, A, the plot, and to the readers, and also, our main character, Frodo. So again, all of that feels natural. And like I talked about, Rivendell is kind of this long section where we dread leaving. We don't want to leave Rivendell. We don't want to go any further. I think when I reread Rivendell, I think and I go, wow, Frodo's gone through this incredible journey to even get the ring to Rivendell. Now he can go home and rest at the Shire. It's just not the case. It's kind of one of those situations where if I look at A Song of Ice and Fire, like Ned going home to Winterfell instead of staying in King's Landing, it really reminds me of that. And I think, again, the idea of who is going to take the ring, I think we all knew it has to be Frodo. He is the character that's brought it this far and has seen very little corruption. And it just makes sense. And I love the theme of not everyone has to be strong or the smartest. Sometimes having a good heart and being a good person and being able to resist power and not wanting stuff like that, to just want to live a happy life. I love the way Tolkien does that and shows the hobbits can be very relevant in this world when everyone overlooks them and no one takes them seriously. If you look at characters like Sauron, if you look at characters like Saruman, I love that. It's another incredible theme that Tolkien is able to put into this story, and there's just so many things I love about it. And this kind of takes our characters. We get this party, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of representation of a lot of different factions. You have Legolas of the elves, Gimli from the dwarves. You have two men for Gondor. You have the hobbits, and then you also have Gandalf. So it's a good party, and it reflects the 9 Nazgul, which I think, again, makes a lot of sense. And what I love, again, that we see here, what Tolkien does with his world, is he makes the geography be involved in the plot. It's something that I think another story element that a lot of modern day stories don't really use and utilize well, where Tolkien uses this mountain that separates the two lands kind of as an idea of isolation, and how Sauron uses that to his advantage, where all of our free peoples really feel isolated. And I really want to talk about that in the next video when I do the 2 towers. But Sauron, I even did this in the Sauron video, really is focusing on how do I make travel from one kingdom to the next extremely, extremely difficult. And that's what we see with our characters. I mean, our characters are nearly forced back to Rivendell, and the only reason they don't is because Gandalf has some inkling of how to get through Moria. And Moria, again, leading up to Moria, it's again the exact same thing that we see with the Nazgul plot, where it's just this constant feeling of unease and tension growing as we get to the Balrog and all of that. And Moria, I've talked about. It's the reason it was part of the first video I did on this channel. I am super intrigued by Moria. It's very interesting. There's this abandoned, this fortress of the dwarves that has been overtaken by some monster of the deep. I love Moria, and I think that section of the book is amazing. And what we get there is just fantastic. The way we discover this ancient realm, and there's this, again, feeling of unease as the party grows closer to getting to the exit, and they're almost there, but then they are attacked by orcs, goblins, and eventually the Balrog. And I love that idea of Gandalf dying. And I kind of agree with George R.R. Martin on the idea that I kind of wish Gandalf had died. I think it makes it a little bit more impactful for his death. But again, the ripple effects are huge for this book specifically, because if Gandalf doesn't die, and I want to make a video on this, how does that change? Now, I know Gandalf doesn't like actually die, but how would that have changed if, say, the company had just gotten out and the Balrog had fallen? Say the Balrog doesn't whip Gandalf. How would that have changed? Because there would have been a lot of things that actually go massively different, because the Balrog in this case would actually still be alive. So let me know if you guys want to see that video. I think that would be a really fantastic idea to explore. But with Gandalf's death, it clouds the Fellowship and the story even more. If you look at the idea of Gandalf has kind of been our leader, even from the beginning of the story when Frodo is setting out on his journey, even though Gandalf isn't there, everything that Frodo is doing is really off of Gandalf's advice. Going to Bree, going to the Prancing Pony, then going to Rivendell. It's kind of all stuff Gandalf laid out. Even their campaign when the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, that's all Gandalf, really. It's Gandalf kind of an Aragorn. And when Gandalf falls, it creates this idea of dread in the company, because Aragorn doesn't know what to do. Aragorn's initial plan was to go south with Boromir to Minas Tirith. So what is the company going to do now? And I love that after Gandalf's death, it's really this idea of, I keep saying death, but it's just a fall. Let's just say temporary, not in the story. And what will they do when they finally get to that point of the Anduin? What are they going to do? It's something that is present and hangs over the entire Fellowship in Lothlorien. It's something that is over them the entire time they're on the river. And I love that. I love that idea of, what are these characters going to do? What will they sacrifice? And even the way this is getting brought up, Frodo kind of already knows what he's going to do, but the company themselves, what are they going to do if Frodo chooses to go on the east route, on the east bank, going towards Mordor. Boromir doesn't want to do that. He's going to go west regardless. Aragorn promised to come west to Minas Tirith as well on that west bank. What is Legolas and Gimli going to do? And this is the thing that I think maybe gets lost in translation in the book to the movie. It specifically said the Fellowship is not like supposed to, well, it maybe is like an idea that maybe you should stay with the ring and the ring bearer, but you're not beholden to. There's no oath binding you to the fate of the ring. You can go as you please. And that's an interesting thought when we look at the Fellowship as a whole. And as we grow to kind of the end of the story, it's Frodo again coming to that realization that he has to do this alone. And we know he doesn't actually do it alone, but it's the realization that he just cannot put some of his loved ones through the ring's corruption and power over people. And that leads us really to the end where Frodo and Sam set off on their journey. Now, the one thing I will say about this book, and as much as I love this book and I think it's perfect, I am actually a big fan of the way that the movie did it, where the movie concludes our Boromir and kind of the other part of the Fellowship well. This book kind of is like a major cliffhanger, because it's like all of our characters are out looking for Frodo and Sam, and that whole plot isn't really like resolved until the start of the next book. Like Boromir's death and stuff like that doesn't happen until the beginning of the next book. So I am like, I kind of wish that had been kept in Fellowship instead, but I do understand why Tolkien didn't do that. I think it's a great note to end the first book on Sam and Frodo's parting from the Fellowship. And thank you guys all for watching this video. I really want to point out that I really do love this book. This book and this movie is something I read or watch at least once a year. This universe has helped me get through a lot in my own personal life. Always has helped me kind of escape, reality and go into this mystical world of Middle Earth. And I have a lot of love for this series and for Tolkien's writing as a whole. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.